Hello and good evening. I'm Sharonda Robinson. I'm part of the project team for the Tannehill Lane project, and I want to welcome you to our first community meeting to discuss affordable housing in your neighborhood. We have prepared a presentation for you, and along the way, we will be asking questions to get feedback and insight from you as AHFC develops an RFP, a request for proposal process to develop the site. Um, I just want to remind folks that we have Spanish interpretation that is available for this meeting. And Larissa, if you want to come to the English room and make that announcement in Spanish for us, I would appreciate it. Mil gracias, Larissa. So again, I'm Sharonda Robinson. I'm with Adisa Communications, and we're part of the project team for the Tannehill Lane site. We are excited to be here and grateful that you have joined us to learn more about this project and help us to develop a really good RFP for development of affordable housing on the Tannehill Lane site. Joining me today are two team members from AHFC, Mandy DeMayo, she's the Community Development Administrator, and Travis Perlman, who is the Project Coordinator. And they will be helping us to understand the AHFC's vision and criteria for the site, and also helping to answer your questions as we go through this evening. We wish we could be with you in person, but we know that there is a pandemic that is still happening. And so we're going to try as much as possible to make this as interactive as possible and um, uh, like just as though we were in the same space. Next slide, please. So I want to review the meeting agenda that we'll go through tonight. We'll cover the meeting purpose. Mandy DeMayo will talk about the Austin Housing Finance Corporation. Many folks don't know that it is a separate entity from the city of Austin, so she'll share a little bit of background there. Talk about what affordable housing means, what the community housing goals are. There's a plan that is in place that we're working from to develop affordable housing throughout the city of Austin. And then Travis Perlman, who's the project manager, will share details on the project site itself, the site description, the timeline and process, and proposed development objectives. And we'll talk about ways to engage as well throughout the process. Again, as a reminder, this is the first of 3 meetings for the Tannehill Lane project. And we will also be happy to answer your questions and take your comments as we go. We are recording tonight's meeting so that we can share it online with folks who were not able to attend and participate in tonight's meeting. Next slide, please. So the purpose of tonight's meeting and the reason why we believe that you're here today is to get your questions answered, for us to gather your feedback, insight, and input, and for us to provide you with information about the project itself. Next slide, please. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mandy DeMayo to talk about the AHFC, the corporation itself, and what affordable housing means. Mandy?
Thank you so much, Sharonda. Again, Mandy DeMayo, the Community Development Administrator for Austin Housing Finance Corporation and the City of Austin. Some of you may wonder, what is Austin Housing Finance Corporation, or AHFC? We're actually a subsidiary of the City of Austin. We're a separate entity. We're a quasi-public, nonprofit corporation that was created by our Austin City Council in 1979. And our mission is to generate and implement strategic housing solutions for the benefit of low and moderate income residents in the City of Austin. We are organized under Chapter 394 of the Texas Local Government Code. And just so you know, there are housing finance corporations across the country, but certainly across the state of Texas. So we are one of many. We do a variety of things to ensure that we have increased opportunities for affordable housing across the city. Our offices are located on East 11th Street in the Street Jones building. And our phone number is on the screen, 512-974-3100. And you'll also see a general email address where you can reach our division. One thing I do want to mention with Austin Housing Finance Corporation, or AHFC, we do not have separate employees for AHFC. We're all City of Austin employees. And our board of directors, who we report to, is actually the mayor and the city council members. So often AHFC and the City of Austin are used interchangeably. Can we go ahead to the next slide, please? I just want to lay the groundwork for our definitions of affordable housing, because affordable housing is used loosely all over the community and all over the country, but we have some very specific meanings regarding what affordable housing means when we talk about it in this context. When we use it, either the City of Austin or AHFC, it refers to housing that is both income restricted, meaning that you have to qualify to live there. You have to have an income that is below a certain amount, and we refer to it as a percentage of the median family income, or MFI. So for our rental housing developments, often anything we finance has to be affordable to somebody at or below 50% median family income, or MFI. If we refer to ownership housing, it has to be affordable to somebody 80% median family income, or MFI. So that's one component of affordable housing. It is income restricted. Only people who qualify live there. The other thing is the housing needs to be rent or sale restricted. So that means that the rents have to be leased. The rent has to be at a reasonable rate. They are rent restricted. Or if it's a for sale product, like a home, a single family home, a townhouse, or a condominium, it has to be sold to eligible households at a certain price that is affordable to those households. So it's kind of a two-pronged approach to affordability. You have to income qualify to live there, and the rent or the sales price needs to be affordable to you. Can we go to the next slide? Why we care about affordable housing. I'm sure it's the same reason you all are here tonight, to be part of this preliminary meeting. Affordable housing helps longstanding residents remain in the neighborhood. We're very committed to providing opportunities that help to mitigate displacement and gentrification, and affordable housing can be one really important component of that strategy. Affordable housing can maintain the area's traditional character, including racial and ethnic diversity. Affordable housing also allows low-income households to spend less on housing so that they can spend more of their budget on other really important things like education, transportation, healthcare, food, clothing. The less folks spend on housing costs, the more they have room in their budget for other expenses. And affordable housing also provides a connection between employment opportunities, business, and transportation. So if we can house folks in proximity to neighborhood businesses, it provides an opportunity for businesses to access employees who are stably housed and living in an affordable situation. Can we go to the next slide, please? The city of Austin has very specific goals around affordable housing, and these all come out of what we know to be our strategic housing blueprint. This was adopted by our city council in 2017. So we're about 3 years into our strategic housing blueprint that established 10-year community goals for housing. Those goals run across the spectrum. So they include extremely low income, housing for extremely low income households, all the way up to market housing. And what our 10-year community goal told us was that we needed to produce 135,000 units over 10 years in order to keep up with both projected growth in the city of Austin, as well as provide sufficient housing for folks who are working in the city of Austin. So that's a 13,500 new or preserved units each year. Those goals are divided by income levels. You'll see on this chart here, we divided the pie or the donut into a variety of different income levels. You'll see the dark red is housing that is affordable for the lowest income folks. Those are primarily people who are living on fixed incomes. So that could include seniors, people with disabilities, people exiting homelessness. Our goal is 20,000 units over the next 10 years. The next, the orange slice of the pie, is folks between 30 and 60% of the median family income. And that includes primarily working families, minimum wage workers. We need 25,000 of those units over the next 10 years. And then the next piece, the blue slice, is folks between 60 and 80% median family income. And that, again, could include first-time home buyers. It also includes workforce population. And we need 15,000 of those units over the next 10 years. The other slices of the pie are the areas that we as a department are less involved with, and that it's more related to community goals around affordable housing. The red, the orange, and the blue is where we dedicate our funding streams, so federal funding and local funding, to help create housing that hits these targets. Again, we're in year 3 of a 10-year plan, and you can find out more information on our website, austintexas.gov/blueprint. We can go to the next slide. Those goals that were laid out in the strategic housing blueprint have been broken down to very specific goals per city council district. And then we also have goals per transit corridor. And so you'll note we're going to talk about the area around the Tannehill Lane site, but we are in District 1 in the city of Austin. Councilmember Natasha Harper Madison is our council member for District 1, and our collective 10-year goal, but for her city council district, a little over 7,000 affordable housing units are needed over the next 10 years. And whatever is accomplished through the Tannehill Lane development will help to contribute to meet that goal. You'll also see on the right-hand side, we have information on goals related to some of the corridors. The Tannehill Lane project falls just south of the MLK Boulevard corridor, which also has its own goals. So we can go on to the next slide, and
that's me.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Sharonda.
Absolutely, thank you so much. We do have a question, Mandy, that I think you or Travis would be able to answer. It comes from Alexandria Anderson, and she's asking about the median income criteria, and I'm kind of interpreting it a little bit, but how is it that it's 80% is the determination for criteria?
So The income levels for many of our programs are determined by the funding source. We have funding, our department gets funding from the federal government. A variety of their programs restrict those access to the programs based on median family income, or MFI. And those typically are 80% MFI for owner and 60% MFI for renter programs. Just to give you an idea, those income levels are updated annually. They're posted on our website. They're derived from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development calculations. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development calculates these for areas across the entire country. And the income levels are based on a sliding scale based on the size of your household. So as an example, 80% median family income for a 4-person household right now in Austin Round Rock is our MSA, Metropolitan Statistical Area. That is $78,100 per year. If you drop it down to 60% median family income, again, for a family of 4, it is $58,560 per year. For anything that is funded with our local dollars, we actually dig a little bit deeper for our rental housing, and we prioritize households at 30% median family income or 50% median family income. So to give you an example, for a household of 1 at 30% median family income, that means you're not making more than $20,550 a year, or at 50% median family income, you're not making more than $34,200 a year. Again, that changes every year. We post this on our website along with our maximum rents and sales prices.
Thank you for that response. And I want to ask my team to find that link for us so that folks can, we can put it in the chat so that folks can take a look at it. But what I took away from that answer is that the MFI is set by the federal government. It is based on the region or the area that you're in, and it happens on an annual basis. And that the city of Austin, AHFC, is prioritizing for renters 30 and 50% MFI, which is a range for a household of 1 between 20,000 and 34,000.
That is a great summary, Sharonda. And just so you know, I just posted the MFI chart into the chat so folks can access it. And if I can do 2 things at once, I will pull up our maximum rents and sales prices as well.
And then the 80% for the family of 4 was, I believe, 78,000?
78,100. That is correct.
Okay. Alexandria, I hope that answers your question. If you have additional questions, we would love to see them in the chat. I think because where we are in the presentation, we've got a question for you that we'd like to get your input on. So get ready to put some comments in the chat for us. The question in front of you that we would love for you to answer is, what type of housing development would you like to see happen on this site? And this is kind of like no MFI, no like big picture, like what would you like to see on the site? Because it's really going to help AHFC develop the RFP process in a way that makes sense to meet the criteria that's been set from an affordable housing standpoint and what we're looking for in terms of input from the community. So if you all could just take a moment to add some comments to the chat, like what type of development would you like to see on the site? And then after we answer this question, Travis Perlman is going to give us an overview of the site itself. So I wish we had a little bit of writing music as we went. And I'll be looking for your responses in the chat. What type of development would you like to see happen on the site? I'm not seeing any responses, so I want to make sure I explain that. Okay. Will this be for renters or homeowners or both? I think we're asking Alexandria for you all to tell us what you'd like to see. So is there a preference for rental units or for home ownership? Is there a preference for multifamily or single family? Is there a type of
Single.
single family? Who said? I heard a voice. I don't know who that was.
Yeah, because it would just be a lot to type in. I think
Okay,
you
go
have
ahead.
to, okay, I think looking at the area and the type of homes that they have, the type of people that you know that live in the area, the type of people that live in the area right now and are looking to be able to afford a home. So I think it's more so digging deeper and finding out who are the people there, what you're looking to appeal to when it comes to having the houses. I think a mixture of single family homes where it can be maybe you look at rent to own.
Okay, okay. It's good feedback. And keep this question in your mind as we continue tonight's conversation, because you're going to get more information about the site itself and about the criteria that AHFC is looking at for the site in terms of development. But we want to make sure that we're bridging those conversations. So I see that Jesse Manicia, sorry, um, wants to ask the Hogpen Neighborhood Association, and we would welcome that feedback and that input in terms of what they would like to see on the site, and hopefully we can direct them to this presentation so that they can get the information that Travis will be sharing. But we appreciate that feedback, Jesse, and also from you, Alexandria. Did
Sounds
anyone else
good.
have
We
any?
will, sorry, I just wanted to let y'all know too that we're gonna share the all the documents that Travis sent along with this recorded meeting with our neighborhood associations too. And that's also going to East MLK contact team too.
Okay, thank you. Is that Jesse? Was that Jesse? Okay.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes.
Thank you so much. We want as many people to know about this process as possible so that we can get good feedback, because the community really helps to improve the decision making. So thank you for your participation. And I see a couple of more comments. Yeah, this is from the team. Mandy says, thank you for spreading the word. And Esteban says, there will be a speak up page or a survey at the end of the process that for you to provide us with more comments. All right, we'll go to the next slide, please. So I love this question, and I'm excited to hear your response or read your response to it. We know that this neighborhood has been in existence for quite a while as part of the city of Austin. And because this is a new opportunity for development, we would like to find out from you as experts in your neighborhood, what would you like for this project to add, enhance, or support? Right. What would you like to see this project add, enhance, or support for your community? So I love the way you're coming off mute and you're jumping into the conversation. Please feel free to do that, or please feel free to put it in the chat, and we will give folks a moment to respond. What would you like this project to add, enhance, or support for your community? See responses coming in. So add park space or support the school next door. Support the horse owners on Hudson. Yes, that's the Rolling the Dice stables. I got to meet, I got to meet them a couple of weeks ago. Great group. Green space.
Yeah, so I just want to point out, I know that this has already been identified as a like quasi-governmental nonprofit. But I know there's that link to the city of Austin here. So
AISD sold this land to the city to be affordable housing. And I just, when I think about what our neighborhood needs, it is affordable housing, but specifically that park space that I pointed out and supporting the groups that are on Hudson is really important. They've been there for decades and there is no water line on Hudson Road. So just want to say that one more time. There is no water on Hudson. The city of Austin has never put a water line in there. So that would be really great.
Okay, thank you for that. And so when you say the groups on Hudson, who else are you referring to, Jesse? And then we'll get to Heather's comment.
Well, this is really close to Hudson.
Okay.
And to me, it's just astonishing that, well, Hogpen neighborhood as a whole didn't receive water for decades. I think this neighborhood got water in the 70s.
Mhm. Okay.
But Hudson still doesn't have water. So I just want to point that out.
Okay. I'm
You know,
following you.
It'd
Okay.
be great.
Thank you for that. I'm following you now. Thank you so much. All right, so I'm going back to the chat in response to the question, what would you like to see added, enhanced, or supported by this project? Appreciate your feedback. Heather Cox says, I'd like for them to restrict the sale or rent to long-term Austinites who are or have been displaced.
Yes, hi.
Andy, did I hear? Oh, go ahead, Heather Cox.
I was just introducing myself. Hi, I'm Heather.
Welcome. Thank you for joining tonight.
Thanks. I was born in Austin and I bought a house, or I bought a lot actually on Bunch Road, which is right off Sam Houston. In 2000, I bought it from the city for $5,000. Built a house and I lived in it, and I finally got taxed out and I had to sell my house. And I'd actually had to take a second mortgage because, cost of living.
Right.
And so that's why I want to make sure that people who move into that area are able to, if they're not just people coming from California, they're people who've lived here their whole lives, like myself.
Thank you, Heather, for that feedback and input. Mandy, isn't there a policy in place to support first right to return? I've heard that around.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, Sharonda. So this year, this calendar year, we will be officially launching a pilot project based on extensive community feedback and extensive vetting by all of our various attorneys. And it is what we have termed a local preference policy. So we are piloting this on any property, homes that AHFC is selling. And essentially this gives preference to folks who have a tie to an area of the city of Austin that is experiencing gentrification and displacement. There are very specific zip codes. We have a map that shows all of the areas. This is based on a long-standing project from UT, University of Texas at Austin. A group of professors published a report called Uprooted. And this report identified census tracts and neighborhoods that are experiencing various stages of gentrification. Our preference policy prioritizes access to affordable housing for those folks who are tied to those specific neighborhoods. And we're working with a variety of different developers to actually do outreach because we recognize outreach to communities that may have been displaced. We recognize that we may be doing marketing to folks who live in the city of Austin, but there are a lot of families and individuals who have been pushed out of the city of Austin, and we want to make sure that they know that there are those opportunities here in the city that are upcoming. I see when I think Alexandria asked, how will you reach out to those individuals who were displaced? They may live in Round Rock or Pflugerville now. You are correct. We are in the process of developing with our communications team an outreach plan that will include institutions in the city of Austin. A lot of folks may have moved outside of the city, but they still come to the city for work, for church. And so we want to use that as a springboard for communication to households that have a tie to the city of Austin, but may no longer live here. So we anticipate that our first homes under this preference policy will be launched in summer of 2021. And then we're going to see how the pilot program goes, potentially refine it, and then potentially based on what we find, expand it to other opportunities throughout the city.
Thank you so much, Mandy. And thank you all for your great input and feedback. Again, this is the first of 3 meetings for this particular project. And now we're going to move to Travis Perlman, who is the project manager for this project. And he's going to talk about the site, the specifics of the site, and some of the criteria that AHFC is looking at as it relates to the development of the site, because that criteria will be included in the request for proposal for the development. So with that, Travis.
Good evening again, everybody. Thanks again for joining us. This is Travis Perlman. As Sharonda mentioned, I will shortly delve in a little bit into the specifics around the property itself and our proposed engagement and solicitation processes for developing the site. But before I get into that, I wanted to make sure that I finished out a little bit more and buttress the point in terms of why we need affordable housing, not only in the city of Austin, but specifically in this neighborhood. And so I've compiled a couple of charts on the following slides from US Census data from the American Community Survey over the last 5 years that we have data available for to kind of help illuminate that point. So the first chart that you're seeing here is basically change in housing costs and income in the 78721 zip code over the last 5 years. With the blue line and the orange line representing the increase in median home values and the increase in median rent over the last 5 years in this zip code, and the gray line representing the increase in median household income in this same zip code. And so as you look at this, you'll see kind of income jumping around, but you see it roughly staying, see it staying above median rent, and you see it somewhat keeping a pace with the rise in housing costs. But as we go through the next slides, what we'll find out is this: looking at data in this way is just a good example of one of the flaws of using summary statistics in terms of missing important trends. And so that said, let's dive a little bit more into the data here and disaggregate it a little bit. So again, what you're seeing here is basically 2 different types of data. One being change in housing costs, and the other being change in incomes again, except the incomes have been broken down into income classes. I'll draw your attention first to the 2 blue lines in the middle, which represent the housing costs, change in housing costs, median home value, and median rent. And then draw your attention to really the green line and the red line, which is kind of the important data points of this slide. You'll see the green line represents the percentage of households in this zip code that make $150,000 or more. So these are high income earning households in this zip code. Conversely, the red line represents the lowest income earning households in this zip code, households that earn less than $25,000. So what you see over the last 5 years prove very clearly is that the high income earning household in the zip code has increased dramatically. by over 300%, to the detriment of the lowest income earning households in this zip code, which have decreased by a third, essentially. And also you'll see the gray line representing income class between 25,000 and 75,000, also not keeping pace with the blue lines, which is the housing costs. And also even the orange line at 75,000 to 149,000 starting to fall below the increasing housing costs over the last couple of years. Next slide, please. And now let's look about how this is affecting racial and ethnic demographics in this neighborhood. Again, I'll draw your attention to the two blue lines, which represent increasing housing costs in this zip code. And then I'll draw your attention to the orange and green lines, with the orange representing households identifying as Black, and the green representing households that identify as other or two or more races or ethnicities. And then lastly, the gray line at the top representing non-white Hispanics. So clearly from this slide, you can see a significant decrease in the amount of Black households and racially mixed and ethnically mixed households in this neighborhood, by 16% for Black households and about 60% for mixed racial and ethnic households. And conversely, an increase of 70% in non-Hispanic white households in this neighborhood. And so from this data, I think we can draw some pretty high level general conclusions. One, that this neighborhood is gentrifying, and that people are being displaced, essentially. And that the influx of high incoming individuals that are able to pay more for housing has priced out individuals who can no longer afford housing, and disproportionately affected low-income households of color in this neighborhood. And next slide, please. And we can see this again from UT's Uprooted study, which Mandy had mentioned previously. This is a study the City of Austin funded that UT did, and I think it was in 2018, that essentially mapped the City of Austin and with their proprietary methodology to identify gentrifying areas of the city. And we see that the census tract which this specific property is located in is represented by a dynamic gentrification pattern, which again, as we looked through the data previously on the last charts, there's no surprise there that this is a dynamically gentrifying area. Next slide, please.
So this is me. Thank you so much, Travis. Great information and great data, and I really appreciate the reactions and the feedback in the chat. Again, I'm Sharonda Robinson. For those of you who are just joining us, welcome. We are now going to ask our community a question about what your lived experience is, about what our community has lost that this project can replace or add. We just saw the data, the changes, and the dynamics of the affordability in the neighborhood. And so just wanted you to think about, from your lived experience, what has this community lost that this project can replace or add?
Well, I just wanted to chime in. Being someone who has lived over here for several years and someone that's highly involved in the community, especially with my neighborhood association, I don't want to say it's never too late, but this is something that could have been done like years ago. Like, I see the students that I mentor their family not being able to afford to stay over here to go to either Sims or even Ortega or Oak Springs. So yes, this is Alexandria speaking.
So I think what's happening is that our interpreter got dropped from the call. and we need to get her back in the Spanish interpretation room. Forgive us, Alexandria. We're having a moment of technical difficulty, but we do hear you. Can you give us just a moment?
Yes, of course.
Okay, thank you.
My apologies, Alexandra. I had a technical difficulty, and I thought I was back in the Spanish room. My apologies.
Jen, because you're the host, you're going to have to reopen the Spanish interpretation and add Larissa to that.
One moment, folks. Give me 1 second.
Absolutely. And we can keep the slide down until we're done with this question. All right. So Alexandria, if you could continue, you were talking about the students families who couldn't attend Ortega or Norman Sims.
I am a person that's sorry about that. I'm someone who's typically optimistic when it comes to being able to help. I think this is something that I'm not gonna say it's come too little too late, but a lot of the families, the kids that I mentor, the opportunities, my friend teaches up at our Ortega Elementary School and can't afford to live. She lives up in North Austin and she can't afford to even live in this area. I loved the question about the comment that Heather put in there about having the long-term rent to own. I think we've lost the culture, we've lost the history, we've lost what makes this area, in a sense, unique with everything that's being developed and that's going up.
Can you talk a little bit about that? And would love to hear from Mr. Hirsch and Mr. Artman as well, and Mr. Grant, who just joined us, and Mr. Alcaron. I'm assuming Andy is male in this case. You know, Alexandria raised the point about what's unique about this community, and we really want to understand that, because those are the kinds of things that we can incorporate into this process. So we take a moment to speak to that question. What can this project add that's been lost? What is unique? You all are the experts because this is your lived experience in your neighborhood. Can I call on you, Mr. Artman?
You can. I'm actually a developer here in Austin, so I don't live in the neighborhood, so I won't have any lived experience to share. I'm here to listen and learn.
Oh, perfect. Well, thank you. Welcome. Mr. Hirsch?
Yeah, I started doing inspections in that neighborhood in the 70s. So I don't live there. I live in South Austin, but I know that neighborhood for over 40 years and all the problems of disinvestment that have happened over there, for all that, no sidewalks, no curb and gutter, no water, and gentrification pressures driving people out. And so, you know, if we're really serious about doing something that we're allowed to do in Texas, then we have to look at not just what happens in other parts of the country, but what are we allowed to do in Texas, because the legislature doesn't seem to be trying to help Austin out in any way. So when we come up with solutions, we always have to, you know, talk to our lawyers about, are we allowed to do it this way in Texas? Because oftentimes the answer is no. And there are some things we can do. And I think some of the things that I've heard tonight as suggestions, some of those I think are things we can do. Others are things that probably I'll be dead before you'll be allowed to do them in Texas. And I don't plan to die soon. So it's a real impact. I didn't buy my first house till I was 65. So I understand, you know, what it meant to rent in this town for over 40 years. So I think what would be helpful before the next meeting, and once you get all the feedback from this meeting, is to roll back to people and tell them what all the suggestions are and which ones the lawyers tell you you could really do and which ones the lawyers tell you you couldn't do unless the Texas legislature changes its mind, because that's contributing to the problems in this neighborhood. And I probably said too much. Thanks.
No, thank you so much. The regulatory framework matters. And so that's important for us. And thank you for sharing your experience in Alexandria. I heard the frustration about this maybe being too late for those families that have been in the area and wanting to potentially raise their kids here, that they got priced out. So thank you so much. Anyone else want to weigh in on the question
This
or
is
have any
Heather
additional
Cox again.
comment before we actually move to a discussion around the site?
Can you hear me? This is Heather Cox again.
I can barely hear you, Heather
Oh,
Cox.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
A little bit better. Go ahead.
Okay, I got a new laptop, so I'm not quite sure how it works. So I'm trying to
All
find
right. That's
So,
better. Thank you.
I just wanted to echo what Alexandria said about it being a little too late, which is unfortunate. But so, as I said earlier, I'm a native Austinite. I bought my lot in 2000 and I got priced out. I had to sell my house. And it's unfortunate that my career choice was in public service. So, I, like you guys, work in government, and I worked in policy for the food stamp program, which helps low income families get food. And I moved into an apartment and I still cannot afford rent here to live in Austin and work for the state government. And so I'm moving to Oklahoma in 2 weeks. And I just want to say that whatever you guys can do to keep the people who've lived here their entire lives, like me, in their homes, please don't give any more benefits to developers and tax breaks and all that. Like, I wish I would have got a tax break. You know what I mean? Like, I paid $5,000 for my lot, but each year I had to pay $7,000, $8,000 in taxes. And it's just really sad. And I love Austin. I'm sad to leave it, but the reason I'm on this call is because I know there's other people like me who are just about to be priced out, and I want to do whatever I can to keep them in their homes. And that's all.
Thank you. Thank you for your feedback, and thank you for sharing the story. This is incredibly useful and helpful information to us as we continue this process. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Travis Perlman to share information about the project site itself. Travis, and we can pull the screen back up, Jen. Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so let's get a little bit more into the specifics here of the site. So this is an 8 acre, approximately just shy of 8 acres, like 7.96 acre property here. That's one parcel here at 3811 Tannehill Lane. So you'll see kind of in the middle of the circle, there's a red bounded box that's grayed out. It says 3811 Tannehill Lane. That's the property that we own. We purchased this property from Austin Independent School District in 2018. And when we purchased it, property was subject to an agreement that we would provide certain levels of affordability, and I'll discuss the specific requirements later on today. So in terms of the site, as you can see, I mean, or let's go back. Can we jump back to the last slide, Jen, if you wouldn't mind? So as you can see, I mean, it has great access to neighborhood arterials and highways, both less than half a mile away to East MLK and 183. Obviously adjacent to Norman and Sims Elementary. It would be a great location for families or people that work at the school. It has great access to public transit. It's within less than 1/2 mile walking distance to 4 transit routes, 1 high frequency transit route, and 3 local routes, with multiple routes going north, south, and east, west. And there's a bus stop literally fronting our property. Jump to the next slide, Jen. As Mandy mentioned, we're in District 1 here, for those that don't know. And the site's kind of in an interesting location here, as you can see, kind of, if you look at the colors on the map that we're looking at here, with the yellow and the pinkish purple to the east of our site. It's kind of in a transition zone between single family residential to the west, and primarily industrial uses, but also some commercial uses to the east. Let's see. In terms of the site is fairly level, but it is heavily treed. There's over 50 protected trees on the site and over 20 heritage trees on the site. So you can see the heritage trees are the dark green ones and the protected trees are the light green ones. And so the trees will be a serious development consideration and design consideration for individuals submitting proposals. We will obviously require them to comply with the city's tree protection regulations, which require protecting trees over 19 inches, and then getting much more rigorous in terms of the protection requirements for trees of a certain species over 24 inches, called heritage, that's referred to heritage trees in the Land Development Code. The site's bounded by Tannehill Lane, Jackie Robinson on the south there. Just kind of midway through our site, just south of it, there is, you can kind of see where that little dashed arrow line is. There's a little piece of right-of-way just south of our site that the city of Austin owns. At one point, they either purchased that from AISD or purchased that from the property owner south of us. And that's right away that they've reserved in an attempt to try to make a connection to Bluestein Drive over there to the east. Next slide, please. So like I mentioned, we purchased this property in 2018 from AISD, and we purchased it subject to a restrictive covenant that requires us that when we develop the site that at least 25% of the residential dwelling units are reserved or rented or sold to income eligible households earning no more than 120% of the area median family income. You know, based upon lots of the talk we had earlier around the income targets that our organization and the city generally tries to target, that's generally over the work that we try to do. And that was somewhat purposeful when AISD sold us the site. It was really at their direction. Their goal, part of their goal and part of the conversations around the sale of this site to AISD was the desire to provide housing potentially for teachers of AISD, to make sure that they could stay in the neighborhoods near the schools that they taught. And generally teachers really start about 80% MFI and go up from there. And so AISD wanted to make sure that the teachers could actually qualify for the housing that we were building. Next slide, please. So I'm going to go over kind of the proposed process and project timeline. And as Sharonda mentioned previously, we're proposing 3 public meetings at this point between now and May. In these 3 meetings, we're really hoping to get some refined feedback that ultimately informs the RFP to be released in June. This first community meeting, we have a survey posted online right now on the Speak Up Austin page that we'll talk a little bit more about later. So in addition to the feedback that we received from y'all tonight, we'd encourage y'all to go there and provide any additional feedback, and also communicate that to any of the people that you know or might be interested. That survey should be open for 2 weeks, and we will come back at the next meeting in April and discuss kind of what we heard from the community. But essentially in this first community meeting, we're trying to identify high-level community priorities for the site. In the second community meeting, we're going to bring a variety of development concepts, so actual visual diagrams of what development could look like on the site, of typical affordable housing projects that we fund, just to give an idea of what the development could look like on the site and kind of have y'all react to that, and provide us some more information around on certain development considerations. For instance, if there's concerns around height or setbacks or design or transportation or flooding. I think the second meeting is really, we hope to, again, we will release a survey at that meeting as well, and hope to get some information about that type of stuff. And then in the third community meeting, we intend to take the information we gained from these first two meetings around community priorities and then around specific considerations around development of the site, kind of marry those two together, bring it back to y'all to tell y'all what we heard and kind of hopefully validate what we heard to inform the RFP. And in each of these meetings, again, we'll report on what we heard. We'll discuss how we've considered it, how we intend to incorporate it into our RFP. And if it's something that we don't feel like we can accommodate in the RFP, obviously that's something we intend to discuss in the community meetings as well. So then, like I said, in June, we intend to release this RFP. It'll be out for 60 days. We'll have a staff review panel made up for subject matter experts from our department and potentially other departments, as well as AISD. A member from AISD will be joining us on this panel to discuss, to evaluate the proposals that we receive. And ultimately, that evaluation panel will score things out. They will make a recommendation to the Austin Housing Finance Corporation executive team. And ultimately, that executive team will move a recommendation to the AHFC Board of Directors to award a contract to a specific proposer group. And again, as Mandy pointed out, the AHFC Board of Directors is the Austin City Council under a different capacity. And so ultimately, it will be the Austin City Council / the AHFC Board of Directors that have the final say in terms of determining what's the ultimate proposal that gets selected and the proposer that gets to develop this site. We expect them to make that decision in September, and we will quickly circle back with that chosen development team and work between the end of September and the end of this calendar year to negotiate and execute development agreements to ensure the development of the site. And then permitting, zoning, development review, and construction, we anticipate beginning shortly after that, the beginning of 2022, with construction being completed some point in 2024. Next slide, please. So, as I mentioned, one of the things when we send out this survey that we have on Speak Up Austin currently, and then as we continue the conversation tonight, really where we want to start this conversation is starting to identify these high-level community priorities. And so what you see before you is 5 community priorities or 5 development priorities that we've identified and that we are proposing to be the central development priorities around which we structure the RFP. And so our ultimate goal is to identify a builder and developer that provides us a proposal that best addresses these different development priorities, with the priorities being currently maximizing the number of affordable units, maximizing the number of affordable multi-bedroom units for families, providing affordable home ownership opportunities for low and moderate income households being priced out of the area, prioritizing housing for households who've been previously displaced or are at risk of being displaced from the area, and then ensuring the responsible stewardship of city funds. And so again, as we continue the conversation tonight, and as y'all move to potentially take the survey and provide additional feedback, certainly feedback around these development objectives, whether you think that they're good development objectives, bad development objectives, whether you have other development objectives that you think the RFP should be structured around. That's, of course, the type of information that, some of the type of information that we're interested in hearing. Go ahead and go to the next slide, Jim, if you would. And so as we start to wrap up and kind of open the floor for additional conversation here, I wanted to point out how you can continue to engage with us. As Esteban pointed out, and as I've talked about, we currently have a survey that is open, will be open for 2 weeks on our Speak Up Austin page that you can find at that link. Again, if you all can share that far and wide, we would appreciate it. We want to get as much robust input as possible. You can also reach out and provide input via email at the Housing Development Austin, Texas.gov email address listed there. And then, of course, we invite you to come back for our next meeting scheduled for March 23rd, which again, we'll discuss the feedback received, go over some of the potential development programs, and open up discussion a little bit more.
Thank you so much, Travis, for that overview. And now we're going to do just what you said. We're going to open it up for questions and comments. We've been having really good dialogue throughout tonight's meeting, and I want to continue that. If you could, Jen, bring down the slide so that we can see each other. Thank you so much. And my apologies, I did not introduce Jen Ramos. She's the woman behind the curtain who is helping make sure that everything runs smoothly, as well as Heather De La Paz, who's on the project team. So thank you, everyone who's helping out behind the scenes. So I think I saw a question earlier from Jesse while you were speaking, Travis, that I want to come back to. It was, does the program cap property tax increases or cover a portion of the increases? So I guess that's, does AHFC have any type of program that supports people with property taxes as a way to maintain affordability?
Travis, you want me to take that?
Go for it.
Okay. So for this particular site, or the Tannehill Lane site, if there is home ownership on it, where the homeowner is responsible for taxes, we mitigate the taxes in a couple of different ways. We don't pay the taxes, but we have a program, a community land trust program, as do several other nonprofits, where the nonprofit or the community land trust owns the land, so owns the dirt, and sells the homes at an affordable price to an income eligible buyer. And because the land is taken out of the property tax equation and the value of the home is reduced, the taxes are also reduced. So it's a way that we within, Stuart Hirsch mentioned some of our legislative challenges. It's a way that within our regulatory constraints, we can keep property taxes for homeowners more manageable. The other way we do this, and this is for home ownership, is anything that would come from a successful proposer. We would, if there was a home ownership component, it would be long-term home ownership. So we wouldn't do just a single at first sale. The home is offered to somebody who's income qualified and it's $150,000 a year. And so it's affordable. We would make sure that on subsequent sales, it's affordable as well. We do this through a somewhat complex mechanism, and it's called either shared or capped equity. So if I'm a home buyer and I buy an affordable home and it only costs $150,000, I have to, when I go to sell it, whenever that is, I have to sell to another income eligible buyer, and I only gain a certain amount of appreciation. So I only sell it to a reduced amount. So it's constant affordability in perpetuity. We have worked with the Travis Central Appraisal District on our restrictive covenants, which are our land use restriction agreements, to have them approved by Travis Central Appraisal District. They recognize that the sales price is artificially depressed or lowered. And so they appraise based on that lower amount. So you may have a home where the market value is worth $500,000, but you're only able to sell it for $180,000. And so it is appraised based on that lower amount, not the higher amount. So the upside of that is that we get affordability in perpetuity. And it's not just affordable to you or to me, it's for whoever we sell to generations down the road. It's long-term affordability. The downside, if you want to say it's the downside, is that as an affordable home buyer, you're not able to make a killing on your property, right? You're able to make a good appreciation. Typically, it's 2% per year. So if you stay in your property forever, then it is your property. It's just like regular home ownership, but when you turn to sell it, you are selling for a reduced amount, and you get a certain amount of appreciation each year. That's if home ownership is in fact what is proposed on this site. We want to hear from you all whether that is in fact what the community is interested in. Is the priority number one home ownership? Is it affordable housing, rental housing for families, for teachers? We want to hear more. We don't want to necessarily prescribe it. And Jesse did say, sorry, I'm looking at the chat, appreciation rate in Austin is around 12% right now. It depending on where you live, it can be even higher. And so this is what we call capped appreciation. So it's artificially lowering the appreciation so that we make sure that you're getting a fair return, but that when you go to sell it, it in fact is sold at a reasonable price to another income eligible buyer. Heather Cox said, is it like you own a mobile home? So,
is that related to the land trust where you?
Yeah, the land trust.
Don't own the land.
Concept could be similar, right? Because oftentimes people lease land in a mobile home community and they own their home. The difference is this is a stick-built house. It is built to our local property code. It is insured. There is a mortgage. It is a regular old house. So the concept is similar, but in practicality, it is different. You would not know that there's any difference between a community land trust home and a home you see throughout Austin. You do not own the land. The community land trust owns the land, which is how the community land trust is able to ensure long-term affordability and in fact that it is affordable, because oftentimes a significant amount of the appreciation and the value is in the land. So all of that to say, I know that kind of got into the weeds. All of that to say though, we're not sure until we have more community engagement. We're not sure if homeownership is in fact the direction that folks want to go. I heard, I think it was Alexandria Anderson who said something about rent to own. That's interesting. We haven't explored that. Is that something that intrigues the community and why? We want to understand different models better. We want to understand, hear from you all, what would really meet community needs in terms of affordability and help do some of those things we talked about, which is, fixing things that have been wrong in the past.
Yeah, it's such a tough conversation. This is Jessie speaking, because the goal of this
project is affordability. And you guys have so many great mechanisms to make that happen. And I guess I would just say that the conversation is definitely showing that the project will be affordable. There are several different directions it can go. There are tons of mechanisms that you guys have at your disposal to make that be affordable and stay affordable for the 99 years as stipulated. But in my mind, I just keep coming back to, you know, this is not wealth building, right? Like, this is not raising people up out of poverty. This is sort of it's kind of a hamster wheel, if you think about it, right? I wonder if there's a mechanism at your disposal, because I don't know your programs in and out. But I wonder if there's a mechanism in there where there can be a wealth building component for people, instead of just, you have to stay poor or you can't stay here. You know what I mean?
So let me jump in and just say that I so appreciate the way that this question is bringing to mind that there are other projects within the city of Austin that have used this similar type model. And maybe one of the things that we could do as a project team is share what those look like. And what that means. A lot of times, and Mandy, correct me if I'm wrong, this work is for first-time home buyers
Right.
in a lot of instances. And so you get in, you're able to afford, you build some equity, maybe not market rate equity, but then when you sell, you take that equity with you and you're able to enter the market in a different way, if you will. And there are some developments that have happened throughout the city that demonstrate that. But I just want to make sure that we know that we've got about 15 minutes left, and we've got a couple of questions. So Mandy, I'd ask you to
move on.
Short answer.
No, so we can certainly, for the next meeting, bring some additional examples. I do want to assure you that this is a way, an established way across the country to build wealth in a really measured and moderate way. It is not a way to make people rich, like real estate is supposed to make you rich. But it is a mechanism that folks have used for the past 4 decades to build wealth in low and moderate income communities. So I do, and we have lots of examples. I am happy to provide those at the next meeting.
This is great dialogue. I want to go back to the trees. There was a question /
Oh, I missed that.
about trees and witnessing developers accidentally damaging trees. And then all they needed to do was pay a small fine. So I think the question underneath that is what are the processes that AHFC uses to ensure the protection of trees during the actual construction process?
Sure. Well, currently, HFC staff, as you can imagine, are not trained arborists. So we rely very heavily on the Development Services Department to enforce the Land Development Code. And so they have a pretty stringent regulations compared to the rest of the country. And a pretty robust program. I mean, I'm sure there are many examples across the city over the last decades that you could point out developers or builders either accidentally or negligently destroying trees. And obviously that's something that we don't want to do. I mean, we think that the green space adds a lot to any community, but especially an affordable housing community, which oftentimes are sited in locations that don't benefit from green space. And so, that's certainly something, for instance, if the public wanted to consider inserting some sort of more specific requirements around tree preservation or something like that, that's certainly something that we could consider, but generally speaking, we rely heavily on the Development Services Department to enforce the land development code.
But Travis, is it fair to say that as part of the evaluation of the various proposals, we will be looking at the design,
Yes.
the proposed design, and how it interfaces with the existing tree canopy, how it interfaces with green space? So we're hearing that green space is important to this community, which I think we hear in most communities. And we would certainly want to take that into consideration as we review proposals, as we evaluate them once they're received.
Thank you, Travis, and thank you, Mandy. So William Grant has a question that he's asking, are there any parallel mechanisms to assist homeowners of 120% AMFI homes with wealth accumulation? So I think what we're hearing is that that we all understand how homeownership builds wealth for families and communities, and how can this project do so? But specifically, mechanisms for the 120%.
So there are very specific state statutes around community land trusts and who they can serve. I would have to go back and look at those state statutes to determine it is not capped exclusively at 80% median family income. That happens to be where we have landed as a city department. I think there are slightly looser rules and the ability to serve folks at a variety of different income levels, but I can't speak to that specifically. That's something we would need to look into and get back to you. But regarding mechanisms for wealth accumulation, one thing I do also want to mention is that with our federal funds as a department, we offer down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. And that ranges from between $15,000 to $40,000 in down payment assistance. That is restricted to people at or below, these are federal funds restricted exclusively at or below 80% median family income. So we have a long-standing down payment assistance program that is not for folks all the way up to 120%. But I will say in recent years, there has been a lot of interest in serving folks up to higher income levels, not necessarily with subsidy, but providing housing that serves those folks. Because as Travis mentioned, well, clearly we're right next to Norman Sims, and we bought the property from AISD, and they have a very keen interest in serving their workforce, who's also being pushed out of the city of Austin. And a lot of their workforce, depending on the size of the household, can skew toward that 120 rather than who we typically serve. There are plenty of individual staff members at AISD who make below 60% median family income, but often families kind of skew toward that higher, more moderate income level.
Thank you. And the 2%, William also asked a question about the percentage rate increase of 2% per year. What is that tied to, so how is that determined?
That is a fantastic question. I will say we have several nonprofits. I'll use that as an example. Guadalupe Neighborhood Development Corporation. They're not on the line right now. They also operate a community land trust, and their capped equity is at 2%. Ours is Habitat also does a capped equity program through Home Base. Took me a second to one of their nonprofits. And 2% is just kind of the standard across the board. Keep in mind that that's 2% per year. So if you stay in your home for 5 years, that's 20%. I don't want you to think that whenever you sell your home, you only get 2% appreciation. So it's incentivizing really folks to stay longer. And often the way the restrictive covenant is fashioned, if you stay in your home for 30 years, there is no restriction on the appreciation.
And I think we got some help with that answer, Mandy, because
I'm sorry.
You're
I'm
too-
so sorry to interrupt. Did you just say if you stay in the home for 20 years, there's no cap on appreciation?
30 years.
30 years. Got it. That's great.
So
There's a point where you
there's
are sort of
there's
fully
Go
vested.
market rate.
correct.
Mhm.
Correct. What this is trying to avoid, the mechanism is trying to avoid people coming in, staying a couple years, flipping the house, making a ton of money, and then it's no longer affordable.
And Alexandria added around the conversation around teachers, affordability for teachers, firemen, police, EMS as well. And
Absolutely. There's a large segment of the workforce that fits, doesn't necessarily fit below 80%. But I will say with our department subsidy, just to be clear, we subsidize at or below 50% for rental housing and 80% for ownership. So our priority is certainly lower income populations.
Can I chime in? We have to remember that Austin is a service industry. It's moving towards tech, but the majority of people that live here in Austin work in the service industry.
Mhm.
So what I'm saying is having it to where that affordability is going to fit them. We're having Tesla built not too far from here, but that's still a service industry. They're going to be making, I want to say possibly probably less than $50,000 a year. And if you're a single family person looking to have it to where you want to purchase and own and not so much spend the rest of your life renting, there needs to be something that's going to meet them halfway.
Mhm. Yeah, I appreciate that.
so it looks like we're identifying and getting clarity around those income levels and like who that community would be made up of that would live in the new development. And so that's really helpful and important for our team to understand from your perspective. So thank you so much for sharing that. I want to go back to the 2% because it's come up twice. And we got some help on the answer from Jesse that 2% is generally the CPI. And I used to know what that meant.
Consumer price index.
Index. Yes. Okay.
So kind of a proxy for inflation.
Inflation, right. And are developers capped at 2% profit is the question.
So the development proposal will include a financial aspect which will be evaluated by our evaluation panel. And that's something that would come into consideration when Travis went over the 5 kind of priorities for us as a department. One of them was being responsible with our city funding. And so to me, that means a whole range of things, but responsibly investing our funds into this development.
And not making houses or apartments cheaply made. I think that's one thing I hear a lot about being put up in our neighborhood recently is the structure and the quality of the houses that are being built.
Thank you for that. Our expectation that goes along with long-term affordability is that the housing is here to stay. Not just the affordability, but the housing. And we are happy to provide information on a variety of different developments that we have funded over the years, which are well-run, well-managed, beautiful, platinum green building, all of the bells and whistles, which we're extremely proud of. And that's what we want to invest in, is for the long run.
So I am including the survey again in the chat for everyone as we bring our conversation in for a landing. This is the first of 3 formal opportunities to give us feedback in a meeting format. We will have another meeting in April. I don't know what month it is anymore. March, April,
It's
May.
March, so we'll be in April.
April. February is a short month. It messes me up every time.
Oh, no, our next meeting is March 23rd.
It's March 23rd, right? March 23rd.
Right.
And then April. So we really do appreciate March, 23rd. Thank you, Jen Ramos. Thank you so much for joining us. The information will be available to you. We'll send out a link with the recording, because we know that there are a couple of neighborhood associations who you all want to share that with, and we thank you so much for that. There is an email address if someone from my team could pop it in the chat as well. As you have ideas throughout this process, please share your ideas with us as well. The next meeting, to paraphrase Travis and correct me if I'm wrong, we're going to talk about the program development considerations. So what types of, these folks use the term products, what types of products would be offered as part of this plan, and just ideas for you all to continue to give us feedback on. And we hope that you will see in our next meeting what we heard from you and how we have either incorporated it or investigated it for inclusion as part of the program, if that makes sense. So I think that is it for tonight in terms of tonight's conversation. Again, thank you so much for joining us, spending your time with us. Thank you to Travis and to Mandy for your presentation, and to our community for your great insight and expertise. And we will see you on March 23rd. Good night, everyone.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Bye.